Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iPhone battery health is something I still get messages about every single day. The good news is the iPhone 16 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro Max seem to be one of the best when it comes to battery health longevity. I wanted to share the iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max battery health, show what others are experiencing, and give some tips to help extend your battery health as well now that we're past 6 months of using this device. Now, over the past few years, iPhones have seemed to be getting worse when it comes to battery health. At this time last year, I was down to 99% battery health with 155 cycles on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. The iPhone 14 Pro Max was even worse at the same time, around 97%. However, at the time, again a year before that, the iPhone 13 Pro Max was at 100%, and this was much better. It seems Apple has returned to this with iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max batteries. So I wanted to share that with you since this is pretty great news. And one reason I think that is specifically because Apple, I think, made a larger battery capacity than they set the phone up for. So Apple currently measures the battery basically by hours of use. However, others have looked at the battery itself and seen that it has a 4,685 milliamp hour battery physically on the battery itself, stamped on it, and it's give or take as it's chemical or electrochemical and can vary a little bit. However, apps like Coconut Battery can show my battery health based on what it currently has versus the capacity Apple states versus what it's actually showing in the battery itself. Now, if we take a look at my battery health, go to battery health, you'll see I have 100% with 167 cycles. Many people at this time of the year seem to have 100% still. There's exceptions to this, and it depends on how many cycles you have, but overall, many people are seeing very good battery health this year. Now, if we take a look at Coconut Battery, you'll see that it says I have 103.7%, and that's because we're seeing more milliamp hours than what Apple actually sees as 100%. And this is exactly what Apple did with the iPhone 13 Pro Max. They built in a little bit of a buffer there so that it doesn't drop as quickly to 100%. With the iPhone 14 Pro Max and iPhone 15 Pro Max, they were actually closer to the capacity listed by Apple. So while you were using them with less cycles, around 50 cycles, we saw them degrade to 99%. But again, that's because there was less buffer there on the battery itself. So it seems like it degraded faster due to that overall physical capability versus a number that Apple has put in to register as 100%. So now that we have that extra buffer, it looks like it's taking much longer to bring it down to 99%. And then, of course, below that. Apple currently states that under ideal conditions, iPhone 15 Pro Max and iPhone 16 Pro Max or any of the iPhone 16s should get about 1,000 cycles before you hit 80% or so. Apple typically says around 80%, then it will start to degrade more, and sometimes you may need to replace the battery at that point. So depending on what you have and how you're using it can make a big difference there, but overall, it seems like it's pretty good compared to previous years because of this. And one thing I wanted to answer that people ask me all the time is running betas bad for your battery? Now, I run betas all the time. I do videos about them, as you've seen on my channel, and if we go to software update, you'll see I'm on iOS 18.5 currently at the time of this video. While technically the betas themselves don't harm the battery, they can use more power as the software is not finished or fully optimized. So because of that, they could drain the battery faster, adding to more cycles, adding to faster degradation. And if the phone is running too hot and again not optimized and the iPhone gets hotter than it should get and doesn't reduce the temperature, that again could affect your battery. So there's lots of different factors that go into this, but the software themselves doesn't just degrade them. All batteries physically degrade over time, and until someone invents a better battery, we're just stuck with the current technology. So at this point, it seems like that's what we're stuck with. Now, as far as charging, one thing I wanted to show is not only how I charge, but how others charge and what our different battery lives are like. So for example, generally wired charging and lower power are better over long periods of time for your battery, but most people upgrade their phones every 1 to 3 years. If it's based on that, you don't really have to worry about it too much. However, the way I charge is typically I use a dock at night or I use a wireless dock in my car. So I'll use a dock like this one from ESR. We'll put it on our charger here, and then I'll just go to bed. Maybe use standby mode, charge my Apple Watch, maybe something else. And that's how I'll basically go to bed every single night. When it's in the car, it's wirelessly charging. Now, this phone, of course, will pull down the power and the overall temperature to make sure that it stays within an optimal range to extend the overall life of your battery. If we go into our battery, you can see when Apple is doing this with these orange lines. So you'll see those orange lines. It was charging, it got too hot, it stopped or slowed down, then proceeded to bump it back up and charge again as needed. So based on the overall usage, it really varies, of course, and it can sort of hold this as needed. So it will bring the temperature down, and there's lots of different factors that affect this. Of course, ambient temperatures, the overall charging speed, and many other things. Now, I charge that way, but not everyone I know does. So I put out a question the other day on X or Twitter, and many of you responded. I showed that I have 100% capacity with 166 cycles. The majority of people are showing 100%, such as Brandon Flash. He's a local YouTuber near me that covers electric cars, and I asked how he charged normally. He actually charges wired and then 20 watt overnight, generally with a 90% limit. 100% limit with traveling, and wired CarPlay on 15 watts for last month in car, or wired 27 watt. So lots of people charge differently. My friend Steve Mosier, for example, you'll see here's Mark's Tech. My friend Steve Mosier charges wired with a 5 watt charger. And of course, I charge it overnight, like I mentioned, but I would recommend a few different settings here. So you'll see if we go through this, I went through every single one of these, and typically around 240 to maybe 270 cycles, it looks like it's going to drop. So I have a ways until it will probably drop, but that's what we're seeing this time around. As I go through this, I've seen it drop to about 99%, usually around 240 to 270 cycles. So lots of different people replied, and many people charge many different ways. But if we go into my settings, you'll see under my battery health here, you'll see its capacity again, of course. But if we go into our charging, within charging, I have it set to 100%, but because I have optimized battery charging on, Apple will manage this itself, charge it to 80%, and by the time I wake up, it's at 100. Many people set it to about 80, and if you turn this off, Apple will typically recommend a different level of what you should set it to get the longest battery health. So I typically just leave it on optimized, let the iPhone handle it, and don't worry about it. And basing on all of the different comments and things I was looking over here in the question on Twitter, many people seem to charge different ways and have the same result. So many different factors play into this, but generally the iPhone manages it pretty well. There's a few tips, though, I did want to give for this that Apple actually says themselves to extend battery performance. So if we take a look at that, on Apple's website, you can see it says tips for extending battery lifespan, automatic battery health management. To reduce battery aging, built-in software and hardware systems are included to manage charging patterns and battery temperature. And you'll see some things that you may want to avoid, such as extreme ambient temperatures. Basically, between 62 to 72% Fahrenheit is ideal. However, not everyone is in those temperatures. Where I live, it gets well over 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Fahrenheit sometimes in the summer, or 35 C. So these things can actually damage the battery or reduce the health overall more rapidly. So if you have your phone in a case, for example, so you can see the actual ranges here, the phone is going to be hotter if it's in a case. So Apple recommends removing certain cases during charging. It says charging your device when it's inside certain styles of cases may generate excess heat, which can affect battery capacity. If you notice that your device gets hot when you charge, take it out of its case first. So lots of things here. I'll link this in the description. And then if you store it for a long period of time, maybe you have an older iPhone you're not using, but maybe you'll come back to it later on, or you plan to give it away. Charge it up to 50%, then turn it off. So these things can really help with battery health. And I think all of the things Apple has added really help with this overall. Apple also has a support document that says iPhone battery and performance, explains about lithium-ion batteries, when batteries chemically age, and much more. This is fairly choppy going through this, but it's their support app. And again, I'll link this in the description if you'd like to read more about it. I have different videos about it as well, but overall, Apple designed it to manage it on its own, knowing what's best for the battery, working with engineering to get the battery capacity to last as long as possible, and of course, the last case scenario is you could replace the battery, so it's much cheaper than replacing the phone. Aside from the tips I've already mentioned, typically I would say use 80% charge limit so you don't have to think about it, and don't let it regularly drop below about 10% or 20%. I normally don't look at this too much, but if it does drop below 10% over and over, that could degrade battery more rapidly. So that's one thing I would look out for. Other than that, I would just use it and enjoy. Now, iOS 19 is said to get a redesign, and this could affect the settings overall for battery and battery health. A little while ago, under battery health, Apple moved this under another menu, where before it would just show you the battery health percentage right away. This is something I asked for a long time, as did many others, and it looks like they added it finally after years of asking. And now it says normal. Now, when it gets bad or degrades, it will tell you need to replace it. This is something I would like to see sort of locked where it says normal and you can't see the capacity. I know many people like all the details, but I get enough concerns daily that people are concerned it drops from 100 to 99%, and then they ask me what should they do. And the reality is you should just continue using it until it's time to replace the battery. Or if it's not getting you through the day, then you can replace it. But either way, I wouldn't worry about that too much overall. I would also like to see more clarification under the last 24 hours or since last charge. Instead of having last 24 hours, we could see since last charge. As if you go to the last 10 days, look at the day before, 3 hours and 39 minutes, it says screen active time. I would love for it to say since last charge, you've had this much screen active time. That would clarify things, tell us what we could get through, charging maybe to 100%, seeing what we get going down to 10% or 0, and that will give us a real world sort of scenario of what we have for actual battery usage. I don't think it's very clear right now. You'll see screen active time, and it's just something that I think needs to be improved overall. But other than that, those are the things I'd like to see in iOS 19, and hopefully this helps you with battery health overall. The iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max seems much, much better. Whether they changed battery suppliers or just gave us that little extra buffer really seems to have made a difference this year. Of course, I'll keep tracking this, see if it lasts to 100% for much longer, around 250 cycles or so, and we'll check back in and see what it's like a little bit later. Let me know how your experience is so far and how you charge. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.